You are now in Changes, a Google Plus Hangout on Air that is live today, Wednesday, November 19th. I'm Sally Ember, Ed.D, an author, a blogger, and the host of this incredibly interesting talk show where I bring other authors in and we have comments and questions from you if you come to our event page while it's live or on YouTube. If you're watching this after the fact, thank you for coming, and you can still put questions and comments if you tag me or tag my guest. My guest today is Olga Nuñez Miret. Olga, say hi to everybody and tell us about you.
Hello, Sally. Thank you very much for having me with you today with this fantastic opportunity actually to join your program. I know, you've been coming very strong for quite a while now, and I heard about it, I think, when you were thinking about it, but unfortunately, because of my, my circumstances at the time, I had to wait a bit, really, to join you live. I'm, as you know, I'm from Barcelona. I've now lived in the UK for 22 years. My goodness, is incredible. And I'm by trade or by profession doctor. I came here to study psychiatry and to train as a psychiatrist. And as I tend to do this after a while, I thought, maybe I should do something else. I studied American literature. I did a Ph.D. on that. And more recently, I went back to working in psychiatry, and I was working in forensic psychiatry for quite a few years. But I've always loved writing, and I've been writing since I was, a teenager. And then I discovered that the possibility of self-publishing, and I thought, I have all these books that I have written and books that I'm writing, and it's a shame that maybe people won't like them, but they might. So why not publish them and see how it goes? And that was a couple of years ago now when I started with that. And the best thing has been how many wonderful people I've met. Some like Sally, other authors, people, artists. People who are involved in having blogs, giving advice to other people. So it's a nice world out there, because before I wasn't doing anything at all to do with social networking at all, really. Being a forensic psychiatrist, I always thought, you meet some people who are not sometimes very nice, and you probably don't want to be out there so they can find you. But, eventually I got over that. So here I am, and I've published a few books, and I publish in English and Spanish too. And I write in English and Spanish in my blog.
Yeah, and I think that's really great, because not a lot of people use their bilingual ability to use that to reach people who speak and read in both languages the way you do. So I think that's really incredibly expanding for your audience, to have people whose first or best language might be Spanish. They can reach you and read about you and read your books, and then people whose first or best language is English can reach you. And then, do you have your books now, are they in the process of being translated into any other languages?
Not for the moment. I've thought about it. I'm from Barcelona, as I was saying, and I vaguely thought about Catalan, but I must say I think I probably would feel a bit more comfortable with other people doing the translation. And yes, I mean, I've seen quite a few people going for German. It seems the thing to do these days. Quite a few Spanish people go for French. I imagine, they are our neighbors after all, although they are our neighbors here too. But I haven't really given it much thought, because I've been, I would say, far too busy either translating mine or translating other people's books too. So,
sure. So you put on your lower third is what we call the banner that comes under your face when we're on these Hangouts, one of your book covers, the most recent published book called I Love Your Cupcakes.
Yeah. And
is that your first published romance?
It's the second. I mean, I've never actually considered myself a romance writer as such, but I started reading quite a few, because quite a few of my author friends were writing romances, and I quite enjoy reading them, the same as I enjoy sort of movies. And I had the experience with my first book, with The Man Who Never Was, that some people would say, oh, I really enjoyed your book, but I wasn't very convinced about the ending. If it was me, I would have written this, or if it was me, this would have happened. And I kept thinking, well, it's me. It's my book, But then I thought, it might actually be quite good to give people different options. So I wrote a book that is called Click Me Happy, that was very much about, as I was saying, I wasn't really at all into social media when I started writing, and everybody tells you, you should be everywhere, you should be doing Facebook, you should be doing Twitter, this and that and the other. So I had sort of some experiences, and I read about people who got into all kinds of interesting situations through social media. So I started the story, based on somebody who wasn't in social media and then meet somebody, etc. And I thought, if it was me, I tend to go for endings that are neutral endings, It's neither here nor there. It's neither terribly happy nor terribly unhappy. But I thought, I know that many people expect romances to end up very well. So I thought I'll write a happy ending. I'll write an unhappy ending, and then I thought, because I normally would go through the middle road, I'll write a middle one too. So that one has 3 endings, and there's a point in the novel where people, can actually choose if they want the happy, the unhappy, or sort of the neither here nor there ending. What I found is that most people tend to read the 3 and then they tell me, I really like this one, or, I prefer the other one. There's the few people who've told me, no, I only read the happy ending because I wanted the happy ending, for instance.
You and I have that in common, because when I write my science fiction books in the Spanner series, I have a romance that's on again, off again, because I write from the perspective of simultaneous time and various timelines that are all possible and could each be the one that is actually happening. And in some of the timelines, the main character, Clara, is with the man she wants to be with, Epifanio, and in some of them, they're just friends, and in some of them, they're hardly in touch at all, and in some of them, she's with someone else, and in some of them, she's alone. And so all these different ways that her love life can go, and then other parts of the story also have varying ways that they can go, but I don't give the readers a choice, read this and then keep going. I keep changing it in the book because Claire's perspective keeps changing.
Sounds excellent. Yeah, it's a very good idea. Yeah, I do like that. Yeah.
I think some people like it, and some people find it confusing, and some people find it fascinating, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I've had people who say, well, it's up to you to write the book. It's not for me. And it's like, well, and somebody else actually who said, well, but I couldn't choose everything. And I say, I never said you could choose it. Well, I didn't actually say. You're told you should not reply to comments. But anyway, I thought, well, I didn't say it was the whole book you could choose. I said you could choose the ending. If you are going to choose the whole book, you have to write it yourself, really. But in general, most people thought it was fun, and some people said, it could never really have ended that well because this guy was like this or like that. But I've seen people who give me very good reasons for choosing either one of the endings, and they're quite happy with it. And I thought, well, yeah, I know which one I would have gone with, but I gave you other options. It's fun. So
it's great to have a chance for your readers to interact with the material and to be improvising with you or to go along with you in a different direction. There are theater productions that do that, right? In the middle of a production, they'll stop everything and ask the audience, well, who do you think the murderer is?
Yeah.
Or who do you think the romantic lead should, which way should we go in the play? Do you want the happy ending or the sad ending? And then whatever that audience for that day says, the actors all do it.
Yeah, that's an excellent. Yeah, that is a very good idea, and that was part of the idea. I also try to encourage people to say, well, tell me or discuss among yourself. But it has physically happened with some people I actually know, who've come to me and told me, I read the book, and they felt obliged to tell me, it's like I had given them homework, Oh, yes, Anna, you said that we should tell you why, we've chosen this. And it's like, it wasn't really an instruction. It was, I thought, well, if you think about it, you can tell me. I'll be quite happy to know, but you don't have to feel obliged to tell me why you like this one better.
But you know what? If you collected all of those answers and reactions and decided to use those in some way, that would be so interesting. You could make a whole blog post with just everybody's reactions and comments on your multiple endings.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. I shall do that. I mean, I'm trying to revisit some of my books, as in to say, starting with the early ones. So yes, that's an excellent idea. But yeah, the one that
Let's talk
Yeah.
about some of your early books because it looks to me like you wrote about forensic psychiatry and writing as you have like an alter ego who's the main character of these books, right?
Well, on in Escaping Psychiatry, definitely. I mean, I guess the title gives it away. Yes, I have a character called Mary who is a psychiatrist and she's a writer. And she's always trying to basically do more writing and less psychiatry. But it proves a bit complicated because, of course, her friends and a lot of people she knows know that she's a psychiatrist. So they keep calling her on for, there's a lawyer in the first case because the book is actually a collection of 3 different stories. There's a lawyer in the first book who, has a bit of an interesting case. There's a guy who is he's defending who keeps saying that he can hear God talking to him. And the lawyer is very convinced that this man is well. He's not mentally unwell, but, because he's saying something that is a bit peculiar, he wants her professional opinion, really. So she gets dragged into this case. And in the other two instances, in the other 2 stories, and the second one is a policeman she knows, who, again, a man, who works with him, has had sort of a very traumatic experience, and he wants her to advise. And the third one, unfortunately, is her who gets into trouble, really. But yeah, she's not, as I keep telling everybody who asks me, she's not me. But evidently, I think some of the experiences and some of the things that people have told me do go into the book. And the things that are like the questions, the psychiatrist would ask somebody she's assessing, yes, that definitely is the same things I would ask, really, if I was doing an assessment.
Well, of course, and when you draw on your own experience and what you know and what you've learned and things that have happened to people you get to write about them any way you want, and that's what fiction is, I think. Nobody can write in a vacuum.
No, that is true. That is true.
So we all draw on that. And I actually tell people that I lend my biography to my characters, my family, me, people I know, things that have happened to us. They're all in my books, but I change them.
Yeah, absolutely. And some are, sometimes it's like the first case, because I wrote the first story in that book quite a while back, and I was studying American studies at the time, American literature, and we were writing, we were reading a lot of African American writers and this sort of civil rights movement, etc. So there is a lot about that kind of background on that particular story. Well, the other stories, I mean, the second one, quite a few people have told me very much sort of like a film noir kind of, style, really. So they're not exactly the same, but the characters are the same, and it's sort of a bit of an experiences they go through, really. So.
Yeah. So if somebody read these books and they wanted to know what is the life of a forensic psychiatrist like, they might learn something about that.
Yes, a little bit, yeah. I mean, although, as I was saying, she's very peculiar because she's traveling here and there and doing her books, and then, she's the reluctant psychiatrist, I mean, I don't know, but there's always the reluctant hero who doesn't really want to go with the guns and keeps getting pulled in the westerns and all this. She's a bit like that, really. It's like, oh, for crying out loud, again, they're trying to get me to do another thing. And in the second story, she is very much, they actually push her into it because they invite her to dinner. And there's this young guy she doesn't know, and she thinks, what is this guy doing here? And then the wife of the captain of the police tells her, oh, he had this experience, the guy he was working with was killed and he's not been very well, and you think, and she knows, really, okay, they brought me here for a consultation, really, but of course they couldn't really tell me that. So both of them are. So yeah, so she's dragged into it, really, that rather than making her profession, I really want to go and do this. But yeah, she's, and I hope there will be more cases with. I'm actually thinking about it at the moment because I just finished. It's not finished yet, but I was involved in the NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing Month project, and I was trying to finish another project that's been going on for a while. And now I was thinking, well, I have to decide what I'm going to do next because I have a few ideas, but nothing sort of lined up specifically.
But you did finish a draft of a book for NaNoWriMo.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of, before I published the first book I did publish sort of a couple of years ago, I decided to try young adult writing. And I did write a novel, and sort of I did try to go the usual, try to find an agent kind of route that, some people showed some interest, but then not really. And then I realized it was going to be a series anyway, and I decided I would write the whole series and then publish the book sort of quickly, one after another, rather than let people waiting forever what's going to happen, just in case they got very interested in it. So that was the third actually of the novels of this particular trilogy that I was trying to finish with during this month, and I've finished the draft, so it should be a little bit of time to go still, but anyway, now I have to do the correction.
That's really great, because I think that people are interested in that. We just got a comment from one of our viewers. Thanks, David Leopold. He's our entrepreneurial expert here on Google+, and he's having a whole week of entrepreneurial visitors on his Hangouts, and he says that we're having such an interesting discussion that he wants us to submit it to his Hangouts on Air magazine.
Oh, wow.
Thank you, David. That's great. If I can figure out how to do that, I have to watch the tutorial that one of your friends did, David, so that I can figure out how to submit it, because it's not that easy, but I will do it.
All right, that sounds excellent. Thank you very much, David. Yeah, thank you.
And I think it's also important to know that there are lots and lots of ways that people are interested in authors and can get their curiosity satisfied than ever before. It used to be that you were lucky if you got a photograph of an author on the back or the front cover of a book, and that would be it. You had to go through their agent or go through their publisher. You couldn't find out where they lived. You couldn't email them. You couldn't call them. All the mail went through the publisher. They were protected, and they were private for the most part. And now, we can put ourselves out there any ways we want, even if we're not self-published. But especially if we're an indie author, we can decide how private or public we want to be. And you and I are both blogging, and we're on this Hangout today, and we have our email addresses published, and we go in physical proximity to readers, maybe do signings or presentations, and people can find us on social media and interact with us directly with no intermediary. There's no, what do they call that, gatekeeper.
Yeah. That is definitely a very big difference, really, because there's a lot. I mean, I did, as I mentioned, I did study American literature, and of course you're always interested in knowing a bit more about the writers, but in some cases it was possible, but it was, people who wrote biographies and spent years going through sort of hidden letters here and there and all this. Oh, there you are.
I was just showing that one of our other visitors has offered to help me put this Hangout on air, because I don't know how to do it.
Thank you, Rain.
For the magazine. So thank you, Rain Dahl, for your expertise. And yes, we will do that. I need you to do that. And so you were talking about how available you are. Go ahead, Olga.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so things seem to have changed a lot, really, because when I started, I imagine like a lot of people, I didn't know anything about anything, really, and you would do whatever people you suggested. So you start with a Twitter account, and then you realize actually people do talk to you and sometimes reply, and you get messages, and people say, oh, your book was very or I'm reading your book, or I bought your book, and you think, oh, that's nice, really. Facebook, and you join groups, and people sometimes, might talk about you or might ask you questions. The blog, I quite like the blog, because I guess it's writing, really. That is what we like to do. So I've had the blog for over 2 years now, because I was recently sort of decided, because of this writing this month, I thought I'll just republish some of the old articles. And I went to the first post I had published and realized I was very much talking about the same kind of things I'm still talking now, funnily enough. But of course, over the couple of years where I've been blogging, and people who've been doing it for longer, you do get hopefully new readers. So most of the people wouldn't really have time to go back and read everything that you've done before. So sometimes it's a good idea just to refresh things, or just to look at them yourself and think, oh well, I've come a bit of a way really now, but
Well, that's important, and we've both come different ways. I was thinking as you were talking about your being a doctor and a forensic psychiatrist and then not really wanting to continue in that field, that I had a similar trajectory. I was trained as a classroom teacher, and I spent my entire childhood, adolescence, and young adult life believing that I would be a classroom teacher. And then I got into the classroom, and I was bored to tears. I did not like it. I liked hanging out with the kids. I liked doing some of the educational things, but I really intensely disliked the tedium and the repetition and the paperwork and the grading, and I really did not like hanging out with a lot of the other teachers. This was in the 1970s, where smoking was still allowed in the school, in the teacher's lounge. Well, first of all, I'm allergic to smoke, and secondly, I don't want to be around it, so everybody would be in there. That's where you're supposed to go for lunch. The whole room is filled with smoke. Can you imagine? So I had to go eat in my classroom. I couldn't be there. I couldn't make friends among the teachers, because when I heard them, they would all be complaining. They didn't like kids. They didn't like their job. They didn't like each other. There was so much negativity in the schools that I just felt sick being there. And I needed to get away. So then I thought, oh, I'll work in a private school. So then I went like all the way from this huge public school situation to a very, very tiny parent cooperative private school in a different state, where instead of having hundreds of kids in a building, we had 40. And we had, I had 125 eighth graders all day, every day. Now I had 12 kindergarten and first graders in the same building with all the way up to eighth graders. But there were only 15 of each, you know. And so I did that for a year, and I liked some of it. But again, I just really didn't like the repetition. I like teaching kids to read, and I like seeing them get it, but then what? You know, it's just, for me, it wasn't that interesting. So then I tried a lot of other things, and all the time I'm writing. I'm just writing really bad poetry and short stories and plays and articles, and some of them get produced or published, some of them don't. And then I work in nonprofits. I decide to leave education and work in nonprofits, and still want to be doing that. Don't have a job right now because I just moved. But I really understand how you could have a position that you've worked for years and years and years, and then it turns out you don't like it.
Yeah, well, in my case, it's a bit like you were saying about the paperwork and etc. It's not the patients. Of course, you know, there are patients, you know, you connect better than others, and there are people that maybe their illnesses are more interesting. But to be honest, I've always found people interesting. Their illnesses are their illnesses. It's the people that I've always been more interested in, to be fair. And but you know, the health services, I think, in your country, like here, like in Spain or everywhere else, they are going through changes, and I'm sure, like everybody else, we're never sure that they are necessarily always for the better. And yeah, there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of targets, there's a lot of people sort of being sort of numbers and having to fit in certain categories, otherwise, you know, you don't really know what to do with them. And that's not really, you know, management is not really what I got into the profession for. And unfortunately, there's a lot of it. I remember the first psychiatrist I trained with when I came here, who told me, you know, are you interested in politics? And I said, well, it's not really my main, you know, aim in life. And he told me, well, you'll have to be if you want to be in this profession. At the time, I didn't understand it, but I must say, you know, years later, I thought he was very right, really. And yes, he did have his own ideas about the matter, but he's no longer with us. But yeah, he was a very sharp man, really. So,
well, what he was trying to explain to you, I guess, is if you don't have that passion, that drive to keep you in a very, very difficult and stressful job, you won't stay.
Yeah.
Because it has to carry you through. I guess it's kind of like being in a marriage. You have to have that deep, pervading commitment so that when there's difficulties, you can sustain. You can get through those hard times and not think that you should leave or give up. But if you don't have it, and I'm sure I didn't have it for public school or private school classroom teaching. I am an educator. I have been in teaching and instructional positions all my life, and I like teaching, but I don't like day after day after day teaching the same things. right? I have a very low boredom threshold. Somebody who did my astrology once told me it's because I'm on the cusp of everything and I expect things to keep changing. And when they don't keep changing, I get restless.
You change them yourself, I imagine.
Well, I have been susceptible to a lot of changes that I don't think I chose.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also chosen a lot of transitions and transformations that more than most people like you know, I've studied a lot of different things. Not as many as you, though. I'm looking at your list, I'm thinking, oh my God, she's a medical doctor. She's a forensic psychiatrist, so that's already a double degree. Then you go back and get a master's in criminology and criminal justice. Then you go back and you get a different Ph.D. in films. And David Mamet, of all people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but David Mamet, his films, the way people speak, maybe it's because that's how they're directed. Maybe the directing is the problem, but they all talk like this and they all talk really fast and this is the way they talk and they have no emotion and it just drives me crazy.
I see you're a big fan then.
I might be a big fan if it weren't for the movies. I should just read his plays.
Yeah, I mean, they're very peculiar. Of course, you know, you have to think that the first movie he directed, not the first movie he wrote the script for, the House of Games, has a psychiatrist as the main character. And she's a woman. So how could I resist now, really? I mean, you must
true.
But I did watch it many years back. It was when I was at Mount Holyoke doing my year abroad for my degree in American literature that I did a course on Hollywood cinema, I think it was called. It was a lovely course, you know. You have to watch movies and you have to talk about movies. What else would you want, really? And there were suggestions. We had to write a long essay, as you know, for the final. And I wanted to write about dreams because, of course, I'm a psychiatrist, you know, what can you say? I wanted to write about dreams, and he said, it's very, you know, and the professor, you know, said, it's a very vague thing. You're probably going to find a lot of things, but it might not, you might find it difficult to make it, you know, the size of the essay. So you might want to look at some of the suggestions for titles. And one of it was looking at con games and all this in David Mamet's films. And I just happened to have watched one before I actually went to the States. And I remember the first one, House of Games, very well. So I thought, okay, I'll start writing. And then I kept, you know, reading about it and telling my friend who was, you know, studying there with me to, you know, there's a lot written about his plays, but there's nothing written about his movies. And she told me, maybe you should write about it. You know, that's an idea. And that's how I ended up writing the PhD. So, but yeah, it was an interesting year for sure, really.
Now, did he also do the play Educating Rita?
No, I don't think it was him, but mind you, the play is very good.
Okay, I couldn't remember. But he has the one with all the salespeople, right?
Oh, yeah. Glengarry Glen Ross.
That one. That's where they all talk like that, and they're always overlapping their talk, and they're all kind of obnoxious.
Yeah, they are pretty, but the movie version has, of course, the Alec Baldwin character talking about, anyway, we're going to keep it clean. But that's not in the actual play. He wrote it specifically because Alec Baldwin really wanted to be in the film, and he wanted evidently a speaking part kind of thing. So he created this part of this character who's only mentioned in the play, really, for that. But he wrote Oleana. I'm not sure if you ever saw that, because if you're interested.
Oh, yeah, I saw Oleana, and I liked that.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting one, really. I mean, there's a lot of interpretations as to, you know, what does it mean and what. But it's, of course, it's only two characters, so it really couldn't be simpler from the point of view of structure, really.
Well, but the thing about Liana that I thought was so disturbing was this whole breaking of the boundaries between the teacher and the student. I think some people might have found it disturbing because of bisexuality or lesbian relationships, but I don't have any problem with that. I'm bisexual anyway. I was more disturbed about this woman who had a position of power and authority, really, in my opinion, abusing that and exploiting this student. Now, you could say, oh, she fell in love, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you know what? I don't care. That was inappropriate.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, evidently, you know, there's quite a variety of versions, and sometimes the teacher is male, and then you have all the discussion as to, it's this abuse. But yeah, of course it could be abuse, because it is, as you were saying, it's a position of power and influence, really. But yeah, I mean, you can say, at least for him, whatever you think about the dialogue, is that he always causes discussion. Whatever, he's talking about, you always end up having a conversation about. It's not one of the things that you watch and say, oh yeah, it was nice, and that's okay, and that's it, really. No, that's not what he is about, really. So it's not boring. It's not boring, but that was one of the things I've done. And yeah, the criminology thing was a bit more recent, while I was still working in forensic psychiatry, because I thought, well, that's quite relevant to the other bit of the job, because evidently the psychiatry bit you train, but the criminal justice system kind of part of it is not really that much part of the training. You learn, what the laws are in relation to mental illness, and you learn a bit more than the standard psychiatrist would know about things like, the judicial system and what happens when somebody goes to court. But yes, there's not that much formal training. And I thought, well, that might give me a bit of an insight. And it's been useful more than anything to write crime books. Really, it's quite handy for that point of view.
Well, that's important, and I think that if you have that perspective and it helps your job, then it's worth studying.
Yeah. I mean,
now,
I also
get into meditation. When did that start in your life?
That was actually pretty recent. That was just slightly over a year ago. I've been sort of reading and looking, and I wasn't, very happy or very satisfied with things, and I felt quite stressed all the time. And then, I had been reading about mindfulness particularly. And there was in the Yellow Journal, the Journal of Psychiatry, and leaflet actually for a course that they were running for clinicians about mindfulness. That was a retreat. That was a 3-day course. And, I looked at it and I thought, well, I'm not really sure how much I would be able to implement it if I'm the only person actually working there who is, trained. But I thought, well, it's an interesting thing to learn about, and I'm sure, maybe if more people are interested, if I bring the interest in, I could be useful. And I was interested for myself. That is what I told, my supervisor at the time. I said, it's a pretty cheap course. That was the other point, really. And, for 3 days, I think it was a very good value for money, to be honest. And they were not interested in spending a lot of money, but it looked like, I had some sort of training. And I really, it was an eye-opener, really, because I had listened to meditation tapes, and I had looked at online things. But it was quite different to be with a group of people there and everybody going through the same experience. And we did 24-hour silence and etc. And I thought at the time when I was doing it, it means nothing to me until we broke the silence, and then we had to, sort of discuss with somebody else how was it with you. And said, well, I don't really know that anything happened. And then I started crying, and I thought, well, probably something actually happened that I didn't realize at the time. So it was a bit of a surprise to me, to be honest, really. I thought, well, it's all right, we're just being quiet and thinking about things, and that's, or not thinking, or trying not to think about things, but, and then I kept at it, and I think I've been calmer, and I've been reading a bit too about it. And definitely help settle my mind. So yes, things have changed since, definitely.
I think that's great that the branch of medicine that is psychiatry all the way over in England is having mindfulness retreats. That is just fantastic point of view. It really got put into medicine because of John Kabat-Zinn and his work at the University of Massachusetts in Worcester at the medical center there about 25 or so years ago, and then it spread all into other professions and other parts of medicine, and there it went right to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it came to us, and I know they keep. I mean, unfortunately, this year I was away at the time, but they keep meeting at least once a year, and they're really spreading and trying to reach more people. So it is an excellent idea, really. And you've been doing it for quite a long time.
Yeah, what happens when people are exposed to parts of meditation that feel that they resonate with them, that they're accessible, that they have meaning, that you can apply it, then it becomes part of what you want to keep doing.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes part of what you choose to include in your life. But if it's just something distant, it's just a concept, a word, a book, something you know about from a distance, you don't know how to bring it into your life, then it stays that way. So I think what you did was great.
Yeah, yeah, it was a great thing, and I hope to be able to join again, either that or another one, really. But
Well, there might be groups around you that you're not aware of who aren't necessarily in medicine, but they
mm,
have sitting groups and mindfulness groups, all kinds of groups all around a lot
mhm,
of different countries now. And some of them are started by particular groups that study with a teacher, like Thich Nhat Hanh, I know, has groups in your area, and other Zen groups and other kinds of meditation groups from other cultures, Buddhists and
mhm,
Chinese and India. I mean, there's so many kinds of meditation.
yeah,
The story that is told is that the Buddha brought 84,000 kinds of methods for
mhm,
meditation and practice so that every single kind of person would be able to find a way in to learn how to meditate and to study and to
mhm.
improve our minds and to become more compassionate.
That's
So
it.
nobody's left out. There's something for everybody.
You cannot say that for many things, really.
No, you really can't. And I haven't even scratched the surface of them, obviously, but I have learned quite a few different methods and done a lot of different kinds of practices over the years. And about 15 years ago, I studied and stayed in the practice of Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism, the Nyingma school, and Dzogchen, which is called the Great Perfection in English. And so
Hmm.
that's my main practice. But I started with transcendental meditation in 1972 with the Beatles. Although they were not my teachers, but their teacher was the teacher of the tradition I started in, TM. And I actually got into it through my boyfriend that I had at the end of high school. And so that's a story that I rewrote a little bit and put into one of my books because I thought it was so interesting and that people would relate to it. And the character that Clara is when she's 17 is very like the one that I believe or remember myself to be. And so what goes on in her mind and what she's feeling and everything that is around that, I tried to put into that little story.
Hmm. Sounds
Because I
good.
think it's very strange if you don't know anything about meditation and you've never seen anyone meditate, it's very mysterious.
We were doing walking meditation at some point, and I remember, you are looking at everybody else. You evidently don't see yourself, but you're looking at everybody else. And somebody, when we were reflecting upon it later, because that was during the 24 hours silence, somebody was saying, "Well, we just look like zombies, really, walking very slowly with their arms to the side." And I actually had the same thought myself. But it was a very quiet place. It was in Oxfordshire, and it was an old, well, it was still a convent actually. So it was a very nice and pleasant place anyway, really, and pretty quiet. So I don't think many people saw us walking around like zombies anyway. But
Okay, but you've brought some other mysterious aspects of the world into your writing even before this, where you've put in magical realism and the paranormal. What parts of that were you attracted to, and how did you put those into your writing?
the first book I published, that is the Man Who Never Was. I wrote the original story many years back when I must have been about 17 or 18. It wasn't very long, about 40 pages or so. And I had been reading a lot of sort of the South American magic realist. I really liked Isabel Allende's House of the Spirits, for instance, was a favorite of mine. Although I liked Gabriel Garcia Marquez and quite a few other writers. But at the time, I had read quite a few. And I did like the fact that they normally talked about families, and families where slightly odd things happened, but very sort of sagas kind of thing. You don't really have just parents. You have parents, grandparents. So and I thought, oh, what would happen if a boy like this, a really really ugly boy, was born into this family? Nobody knew who the father was. And everybody was so convinced that he was so ugly, there must be something quite odd about him, and something would happen. He would have either special powers or he would be very bad or something. And to be fair, my main character, that is called Jesus, is not really very odd when you get to meet him. He's quite a nice guy, but everything around him is quite odd. All kinds of things happen, like he has a sister who starts talking when she's a toddler, and she's sort of precocious child, and she does all kinds of things when she's very young. You know, she actually can't tell what's going to happen. She is sort of clairvoyant and knows what's going to happen, although she doesn't always tell people, though. It's her own, you know, interpretation of, is it worth this person knowing or not? Should they, you know, or is it going to do them more harm than good? And you know, and yes, quite the special things, and it keeps happening in generations. You know, what people are slightly odd, really, and similar characters. He meets his wife, and it seems that in her family there was also this mysterious man who nobody knew about, who also appeared and had a child, you know, etc. So this character of his father keeps coming up, but nobody really knows who he is. So it was a bit of that story, but it was very short, my original version. And I discovered it sort of about 20 years later. I read it and I thought, you know, it's not very long, but it has sort of interesting things in it. Maybe I should rewrite it again. That was in Spanish. I wrote it in English then, and then I translated it back to Spanish. So that story has gone back and forth, back and forth. And eventually I thought it was an interesting book to publish first, because it was sort of, it had a lot of story to it. And I thought, well, it's a bit of everything, really, for people who like, you know, families and bizarre things. And it has a bit of politics, and it has a bit of, you know, sports, and it has a bit of the world of cinema, because people do all kinds of things in the novel. You know, the different characters, you know, get into all kinds of things. So.
And then how did you write the clairvoyant part? Like, what was the source of her power?
I didn't actually clarify very much. You imagine, well, I never actually elaborated very much on that, really. I mean, she just seemed to be born this very strange child, and you would have thought that because he is the one whose father is not known, maybe this father was something special, but is, you know, they don't share the same father with his sister. And the father actually that the sister has is pretty boring, really. The mother is actually quite special, so I think my thought, and I think probably quite of the readers, is that the mother probably is the special one. This father just happened to come along, really, and maybe he was ugly, but there wasn't very much else mysterious about him. But I think I leave that to the imagination of people, because it keeps coming up. There's further generations where there are also girls who are very precocious, really. So, but it's a fait accompli kind of thing. You know, she just knows things, and she's a bit different. Everybody likes her, though. She's a very likable character. But
okay, so you have a wide variety of genres that you write in. You have a mystery thriller. What's the title of that? Families, Lust, and Cameras?
Yeah, that is again a novella. It's not a very long book, and it's one of them that I had written a while back. And you know, I looked at it and I thought, somehow it seems to have become even more of the time than it was when I wrote it, because I wrote it at the time when I was thinking about video cameras. So we're talking about quite a few years back. And then I realized that now, really, there are cameras everywhere. At the time, there were not cameras everywhere. Now there are cameras everywhere. So, and it's sort of a strange story about a very obsessive character and his relationship with, she's not the sister, really. They are adopted, or by marriage, they are related, really. But it's about obsession and about how people can get so involved with media that they forget about people, really. They just only can live if there is a camera in front of them and not anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a cousin. One of my cousins was so phobic about cameras when she was a child that she would just sob uncontrollably if someone even pointed anything that looked like a camera at her. Mm-hmm. An ashtray, a glass ashtray, if you held it up in front of your face, she would scream and cry and tried to run away. Well, she grew up to become a photographer and actually the director of photography at the local newspaper. And I think the reason for that, partly, is so that she would always be on the other side of the camera.
It's a very good explanation. Yeah, it makes perfect sense actually to be in control of the camera. Indeed, yes,
And she's actually got an excellent eye. She's quite gifted in that way, but she doesn't want to be the subject,
I
right?
understand that. Yeah, I don't. I wasn't to say I don't like cameras very much, just being here. But anyway, but yes, I always the concept of the selfie that has become so popular these days. I has never actually understand. I remember going for trips and everybody wants always their picture taken in front of everything.
Right.
Whatever monument you're visiting, and it's like I know how I look like. Probably the person I'm showing the picture to, they have seen me, so they know what I look like. I'm taking the picture of the thing, not me. Why is the point? So, everybody would go around, can you take, and I'm terrible actually at taking pictures, to be honest. Now it's easier with digital cameras, but I always had my finger in front of the thing.
I'm famous for cutting off people's heads or not having things in focus. My son actually said to me that I'm the only one he knows who can take a picture with a digital camera that's out of focus. He doesn't know how I manage it because it's supposed to be autofocus. Somehow I can do it.
I'm pretty good at that too, yeah.
I can't believe it, but here we are. It is a quarter to the hour. And I told you that the time would fly by, and here it is. So we are at that point where I want to remind everybody that Olga Nuñez Miret is my guest today on episode 13 of Changes. We are in November 19th of 2014, and she is a very accomplished and prolific author across many genres. And I'm going to let her tell you near the end how to reach her and what her current and recent projects are. But before we do that, I want to remind everybody that we always appreciate your viewing whenever you view, and your comments and your questions, even if you didn't get to see us live. Please send them to Olga or to me directly, and you can reach us. You'll see on the event page, and in the last part of the video, we'll say it out loud. And also, I would like to remind everybody that I'm also looking for guests. And we have an opening December 31st, and then all the rest of the openings are in February and beyond. So we're looking for authors and writers of all kinds to come and talk with us and tell us about your life and have a conversation. Right now I'm going to ask the question that I always ask my guests near the end, where you get to pontificate and have a platform to talk about changes, because that is the overall topic of our hangout. So Olga, given the local, personal, regional, statewide or global, political, social, environmental, political, and any other kind of changes you're aware of, what are the ones that engender hope or fear in you and that you would like to talk about today?
Thank you, Sally. And thank you to everybody who's been here and who's been going to be here. With regards to changes, I think I was going to say everything changes. I've realized that more recently, but I guess we all know. There's a famous Spanish poet that used to say, that our lives are the rivers that go to the sea. So they are changing all the time. They're never exactly the same. And I have seen, we can look at things like, unfortunately, some of the things like the Ebola, I do want to call it crisis because the illness or the virus has existed for quite a while. And I think eventually now, thanks to not only, social media, but social media actually do have power, can change things, can get people together, can get projects together, can get funding for things that, before they were very difficult to get funding for, and can gather people around and get them interested in things that maybe are not just around the corner of their houses, but that they can have an influence to. Sometimes people these days, because there are big corporations, everything costs a lot of money, feel that they have no power to do anything. But actually we all have, even if it's a small little voice, and if we all get together, we can actually start making people at least listen to us. That is a good thing in most cases. With regards to locally, I've been coming and going a lot because of, family issues. And in Spain, in Barcelona, we have the issue of, Catalonia, is it going to become independent from Spain or not? And I know a lot of countries that are wondering about these things. I'm not really sure what that's going to do. I know some people think, we should be global citizens, and I guess that is quite true. Now we can be, because, I'm communicating with you who are, at the other end there, and I'm sure we have people listening to us from all over the place who probably we will never meet in person, but they're still friends. And since I started blogging and interacting with people, I've met people from all over the place, people from places I didn't know existed, to be honest. And it's fantastic. So I think it's a good time to connect people. But it's also a good time to remember the people who are around you, I think. I did, in my life, I did decide to make some changes recently, and I left the job I was doing because politics, because cuts, because cost improvements, because whatever we want to call them, dictated that money is more important than people. And I don't think that is the case. And I think that's one of the things that we need to make is about, really. And I'm not sure, the fact that I'm writing or that I'm talking in the blog or etc. makes a lot of difference. I'm not particularly always talking about politics, but I find that when you talk about, I'm going to try and do whatever I'm dreaming of, and I'm not going to let people tell me what I should be doing, and we all can do whatever, there's normally a lot of response. So I think a lot of people feel that, there's more to life than just being a number and just doing your little thing, really. So hopefully, we can try and find moments, things, and enjoy the little things we can do, really. And sometimes they might become bigger, and sometimes not. Not everybody can be, sort of the biggest star in the universe. But it's not necessary, really. You just have to be as good as you can be, really. That's the main thing. And you have to enjoy the people around you, the nature around you, and look after things. I mean, I know the environment is a worry to everybody, but we have to do the best we can to leave the world a better place than what we found it, really, hopefully. So that's my main thought, I think, on that matter. But yes, don't be scared of change. I mean, I know, from my patients and etc., change is very scary. It doesn't always have to be for the worse. And, we have sometimes to embrace the possibility that, things will change anyway. Why not try and make them better and try and sort of join in and, do a bit, do our bit.
I think that so many people are afraid of change and have bad and negative experiences, sometimes with forced changes, that there's a whole realm of platitudes and aphorisms to go with change, like when one door opens, another closes, when one window opens, another closes, or the other way around. I'm not even saying it right, but you know what I mean. And or they'll say that, everything happens for a reason, or you never know what's around the corner. There's just all these ways to reassure ourselves.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But
so
I think
we must need a lot of reassurance.
It is true, but it's always it's not so much the change. Well, sometimes there are changes that you cannot do anything about, but sometimes it's how we see things or what we do with the things. It's like mistakes. I think mistakes, we are all going to make a mistake. Nobody's perfect. And we were talking about our problems with technology and cameras, but at all levels, if you're trying something for the first time, it's very difficult to get it right, really. But it's what you do with it. It's the fact that, you look at, 2 years later, or I'm sure now, you look at the first time you had a hangout and you thought, my goodness, this is a bit complicated. And now you can do many more things than you could do before. And you think, gosh, it's incredible, really. It doesn't look like much now, but at the time, it was a scary thing to do. But,
like, watch this. I'm going to show everybody your Amazon author page right now. See, because I know how to do this now, and hopefully it won't kick me out, which it sometimes has done. So is it sharing? Can everybody see it? There it is. Right? And you have so many books, and I just want to remind everybody that because you are bilingual and you do your own translation, every one of your books is available in both English and Spanish.
Yeah,
And
that's
so you have these covers that are in English and in Spanish. So if people want to buy your
mhm,
books, they can tell immediately which one to get by the way the cover is written.
mhm.
And you also have updates here, and you have some video links, and you have great pictures of yourself and everything like that. So that's something I didn't know how to do, or when I tried to do it the first few times in my Hangouts, it
Mhm.
would fail. It would kick me out. So
But now you've
I hope
mastered it.
everybody got to see that. I'm not sure everybody got to see it though, because sometimes that part doesn't work.
All right.
But we try. We do the best we can, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yes, and I also, apart from translating my books, if anybody's interested or needs a translation, either from English to Spanish or Spanish to English, I do them, So and I enjoy them actually. It's an interesting experience, to be honest. You do learn a book inside out much more than if you just read it as a reader. To be
Well, we have a comment here from another viewer that I want to put up because
Mhm.
um,
Oh,
this
Smarty, she
person
might
has
have.
really liked our conversation and says, "What a treat of an interview." Thank you, Marty Preller, or Prayer. I'm not sure how to say your name, but she has been watching or had heard part of it. I'm not sure how much. And I appreciate your comments and your visit
Thank you,
to our
Martin.
hangout. Is that a friend of yours? Is that someone that you know?
Yes, I know her. I think we were talking about her before we were on air. She's a South African author. She writes children's books, and she's very, very well liked in her country. But unfortunately, a lot of them are in Afrikaans. So I have read
Okay.
some of her books in English, but unfortunately, my Afrikaans is not up to standard really. So, but I keep encouraging her to get some of them translated because some of them sound fantastic. But I only hear her stories of what she tells me.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, that is a really big situational difference with Google Translates. I don't know
Mhm.
how often you've used it, but it's kind of funny because I've used it. I know enough Spanish to know when it's not right and the
Mhm.
way that it's not right, but it does get most of it right.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. It is true that for some languages it's worse than from others because sometimes I get, I don't know if I'm sure it happens to you, some Twitter followers that I don't know where they are from, and I don't understand anything, and I think I'm not really sure I want to follow somebody, I don't know what they're saying, but I do try to translate, and sometimes it makes no sense at all, and sometimes, as you were saying, apart from one word or two, you think, yeah, yeah, I understand,
Right.
it's quite good,
Well, that's
but
one of the changes I am really happy about, that we are in the era of Google and the era of social media and the era of so much information being available at our fingertips and in our pockets and on our faces with Google Glass and probably pretty soon as an implant. And I'm going to leave everybody with the idea that this is the era where you can get in touch with Olga and she's going to tell you how. So tell us how you want people to reach you, Olga.
hello. Well, I can be reached in big variety of ways. I mean, if you check, as you can see under my picture there, that's my website, and it has all the links to Twitter, Facebook. I have an author page in Facebook. I have an author page in Amazon. My books are sold in other places too, like Barnes and Noble, Kobo, etc., apart from Amazon. But you can check the Amazon page. And I have a blog that is also included. If you'll find it in one of the pages of my website. And I normally blog twice a week in Spanish and English. And you can leave comments there, and you can leave me comments everywhere, really. And I was going to say, and there's also my email address, or one of my email addresses in my website if you want to write to me, directly. But I'm usually available everywhere, really. If you see me, just wave at me physically or, on any of the social media.
And I'm just going to say it out loud for people that are listening instead of watching, that it's www.olganm.com. Olga Nuñez Miret, olganm.com.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you again for being my guest and for being such a great conversationalist on our Changes Hangout on Air. I want to remind everybody that next week in America is Thanksgiving week, and Wednesday there is no show. So Wednesday the 26th, you will have to go without your fix for Changes. And we will resume our schedule on December 3rd. And my guest on that Wednesday is author John Howell, Howell. I'm very excited about having him. And we are going to have another great conversation, 10 o'clock Eastern Time USA, live. And you can watch all of the episodes on YouTube anytime after they've been shown live and anytime after that. And if you want to know more about me and get all the information about the show and anything else I'm doing, the Spanish series, my blog, and other things, go to sallyember.com, SALLYEMBER.com. And I'm going to let you say your goodbyes and thank yous, Olga, and then we're going to sign off.
Thank you. Thanks, Sally, especially for having me here, for organizing all this, and for your technical savvy, because I'm terrible. And thank you, everybody, for watching and for listening. And please, especially read a lot, read our stories, and and comment and connect, really, because now that you can, make the best out of it, really, and have a happy Thanksgiving for next week.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for watching. Thanks Marty, Rain, David, Sheila, other people who were here live and who will come later, for being here and commenting. And like I always say at the end for everybody, I hope you do well with your changes. Bye-bye.